And start my recording. Do we have any left over? I have 2 left over. Okay, so I need to know who those 2 people are because I shouldn't have any left over. Does anybody know? Okay, so this is really silly sounding, I guess. I was gonna have us go around and introduce ourselves, but there's just so many of us, and for time, I think I'm going to do a schooly thing, and I'm going to call roll. Oh, but okay, so here's what, to make it more fun though. When I call your name, you tell me, raise your hand or stand up, and then tell me what your favorite flavor of ice cream is. All right? Okay, so I will not call myself, but I will introduce myself to you. I am Mrs. Ferguson, and I like chocolate peanut butter Rebel ice cream from Whitey's. I like it in a malt with chocolate flavoring. Okay, so the first, I know, I can't have it all at once, right? We can't have it all at once. Okay, so Julia, but I don't see Julia. She's not going to be here at all? Okay, so she is, I have an extra, okay. Alice. And mint chip. Our grandma likes mint chip. Sophie, ice cream. I'm sorry, oh, okay, I'll agree with that. Ice cream. Yes. Simeon. Okay, did you guys hear the comment about not having conversations with your neighbor? Okay, that's fine. That was a comment directed towards the future. Okay, Briley. Oh, yeah. Alex McAlpine. Hannah. All right. Lucy. Is she going to be here in the future? Okay, so she's the other. Okay, we got it. But I'm going to go through anyway. Kyle, even though I know most of you. Ethan. Oh, this is where we have more than one Ethan here. Ethan Smith. Oh, yeah. Alex W. Okay. Lauren. My husband. Strawberry. Karsten. Guys? No, we're not. Guys, because there are so many of us in here this year, I'm going to have a very low tolerance for outbursts, okay, that aren't related to Rome. If you want to have an outburst on Rome, let her rip, okay? But Ashley. Ooh. Ethan Godwin. Mr. Oh, yes. It's an oldie but a goodie. Do we see EJ? Is this our preferred? Elizabeth? Okay. And Tatum, am I saying your name correctly? And what you like? Moose Tracks is good. Okay. All right. So like I said, we are large and we are a little echoey, so we're going to have to be on our best behavior, which doesn't mean we're not going to have good conversations and have a good time. And those of you who had me before, I hope we have good conversations and have had a good time. I have just given you a reading guide, and we're going to be taking a look at that this morning. Actually, let's just stop and take a look at it right now, okay? Let me take you on a tour through it. This is your guide to everything we're going to do this year in this class. It's got a table of contents, and if you open up to page 1, you will see that it says week 1. This is week 1 because, for obvious reasons, because we haven't been here previously. This is week 1. So week 1 tells you everything you're going to do during the week after we meet, right? It gives you information. I'm going to be going over this sheet with you in a minute. It gives you sometimes writing, information about your writing assignment, and it also gives you questions that you're going to answer. In the back, there are some other writing helps in the very back. I will show you those as the year progresses, information about Roman names and Roman money and things like that. But let me just ask, let me throw this out to begin with. And before I begin, my clock is gone. I know. So you guys are going to have to bear with me because this is the only way I know. It's going to not be there because I used to pace myself by the clock. So A, if I check my phone, it's not because you're boring, checking the time. And B, it might be harder for me to pace myself this year. I went short with the junior high kids because I was so afraid of going over because I didn't know what time it was. So it might take me a little time to get in balance. And you guys who had me before know I tend to go over. Yeah, so we'll try not to. What? You know what, if you could manage to get a clock back, I mean, not right now, but by next week or sometime soon, that would be great. So we're going to spend a whole year, this year, talking about the world of Rome and the history and literature of Rome. Why do you think I think it's worth our while to spend a whole year talking about this? What do you think, Ethan? Okay, because I love it. Because I love it. Okay, there's really not a reason to subject other people to it, but when we love something, we do subject other people to it sometimes. That's not my main reason, but that's why I'm really looking forward to this year. What do you think?
Ancient Roman literature and history can teach us virtues and, in some cases, help us avoid mistakes that other people make.
Okay, so hold on, don't forget. Hold on, let me comment on his. Virtues. When we read about people of the past, we can witness the train wrecks of their lives sometimes without making a train wreck of our own lives, you know? And the train wreck of their government without making a train wreck of our government, hopefully. And another thing about the Romans, I don't know, some of you may have read historical fiction about Rome or know something about Rome. Some of you maybe don't know anything. They cared a lot about virtue. Now, they weren't the Christian virtues, but some of those virtues the Christians took over because they're good. Temperance, which is being moderate in your food, in your habits, and your wants. Fortitude, courage, wisdom. Temperance, fortitude, courage. I'm missing one of the 4 cardinal virtues. It'll come to me later. But these were people who believed in doing their duty, even when it was hard. And that's not a bad thing. And we have that added benefit, though. We have the grace of God to help us do our duty. We don't have to do it alone like the Romans did. Okay, yes, Kyle, you're up.
How big the area was that they covered, and how telling about things that they did, where we can learn a lot more from them.
Okay. Because so I'm gonna tell back to you what I think you were talking about. The Roman Empire, they eventually ruled most of the known world, a huge chunk of the world for a very, very long time. And there's no need to write this down, but I'm just going to show you how long a time we're actually talking about here. Roman history is generally divided into 3 sections, okay? And the first section was a monarchy. They had kings at first. From 753 to 509 BC, okay? Then eventually, they got very unhappy with their kings. It was not good. We're going to be reading about that next month, so I don't want to spoil the story for you. But they decided we didn't want to do kings anymore. Kings are out. We hate kings. Let's have a republic. And this is another reason studying Rome is very beneficial for us. What kind of government do we live under? A republic. Why do we live in a republic? Because the founding fathers of our country knew all these people we're going to read about and talk about this year. They knew them so well because that was their education. That was their training. And they looked back into the past. And those of you who had me last year can probably tell me why they thought pure democracy was not a good idea. The word would be Athens, right? Yeah. It would be, let's vote to massacre a whole city. Oops, we got up the next morning. We decided we didn't want to massacre the city. Let's vote again. And let's send another boat and hope it gets there before the massacre boat. This is a true story, is it not, from last year? And he's laughing because the second boat did get there first and they didn't massacre everybody, thankfully. But the founding fathers of our country looked at that and they said, democracy is dangerous.
So did Plato's Republic.
In Plato's Republic, he said democracy is degenerate. It's what happens to good government when it degenerates, right? But they said a republic. Now, that's more balanced. We will elect people who will represent us. And if we don't like what they're doing, we will get rid of them. That sounds kind of ominous. We won't put a hit out on them. We will re-elect other people, right? We won't just get rid of them. And then we will put new people in their place. And we don't want them to be ruling for very long because they'll get all full of themselves, you know? So they looked back at this and they said, we want to be a republic. Rome was a republic from 509 to about 27 BC. And then, that got bad too, and it got angry. It was angry and bad. And it was kind of like he's smirking a little bit. As time went on, there were a few men who rose to the top, and they had a lot of power. And those powerful men also had armies, and the armies had swords. And when a powerful man comes up and he says, you're going to do what I say, or you're going to answer to these guys with the swords, it causes a lot of trouble. And it did, and they spent about 100 years fighting each other. I mean, blood in the streets, fighting with each other. No, about 100 years, 70 or so of civil war, of one general after another saying, I'm in charge now. And these gentlemen with the swords would be the reason why. One of them that we're going to read about later this semester actually posted every day in the Roman Forum a list of the people he intended to kill. Every day, a new list. And it was allowed to just go kill them. It wasn't against the law. He will reimburse you. He will reimburse you if you bring their heads. And can you imagine? You just go, you send your servants, if you're of an upper class, you send your slaves, your servants, go to the forum and see if my name's on the list. And you just, it's not on the list. That's what it turned into. Until one man got all the power in his hands. That man was named Julius Caesar. I bet you've heard of him. You'll be hearing about him again this year. And he got all the power in his hands until he didn't, and they stabbed him repeatedly until he died. A lot of times, over 30 times. And then it seemed like everything was yay. We're not unhappy anymore, and we're not angry anymore, and everything is just happy. Oh, look at that. Everybody's happy. And it was not the case, because Julius Caesar had a grand nephew whom he made his heir, and this young man named Octavian, he was 19 years old, and everybody thought he was a joke. He's going to do anything. He was not a joke, though. He had used his 19 years very well, and he came in and he cleaned up Rome. He bumped off the guys who killed his granduncle. Then he bumped off he doesn't sound like a very nice guy the way I'm telling it. Anyway, went to war and conquered. Bumped off sounds a little nefarious. Until he stood alone. And we know this man as Augustus. You don't have to write this down, by the way. I mean, you can if you want to, but this is what we're going to talk about all year. Does anybody know what August means? I mean, I know it's a month of the year, but what does August mean? Grand, honored, majestic. They gave him a nickname, Augustus, because he was so honored, right? And unfortunately, though, Augustus had learned that this republic was dead. There was no way he could bring peace and turn the rule back over to other people, because more men would rise up and they would take over. So this started the period we know as the Empire, the Roman Empire. And it went from 27 BC to 476 AD. So if you think about it, if it started in 753 BC, and it went 476 years AD, and so we can add those together, (1,229 years. 1,229 years of Rome ruling the world. And I feel like that deserves a year of our time, reading about that big a chunk of history. Not to mention, the greatest event in the history of the universe happened. Right in here. The birth of Christ and the church growing. So these are all really compelling reasons for me, in addition to the fact that I just love it, for spending a whole year talking about these people and discussing them. This first semester, we're going to spend a lot of time. This is just going to smudge. I'm sorry. I tried a Kleenex. This thing is not. I just have to live with it. I'll clean it later. Maybe I'll get a new eraser or something next week. Use the board. Maybe next week I should try both sides. The other side's so clean, though. I hate to mess it up. The first semester, we're going to spend doing a lot of Roman history. A little more history than literature. You know, last year we read lots of plays. We're not going to really read any Roman plays. So more history books. But there is no, so this is going to mean something to my students from last year. There is no Herodotus or Thucydides this year, okay? There's no enormous. There's nothing enormous. The second semester, though, we're going to talk a lot about the rise of the church. And we're going to read some of the earliest church fathers. Do you know, growing up, I was not taught any of this. I didn't know anything about church history, and these are my brothers and sisters, and I really ought to know them, and I didn't. So don't feel bad if we talk about a bunch of people and I never heard of them. Welcome to most branches of the church who don't know these. But do you know we have writings from people as early as 90 AD? After this is 90, 100 AD. We have letters from the Bishop of Rome to the Corinthians again. We have letters and writings from people who were students of the Apostle John. Wouldn't you like to hear what a student of John had to say? I feel like we should listen to that. That would be cool, and we're going to read it second semester. So that's what we're going to do a little more in the second semester. So first semester is kind of more Roman history. Second semester, a little more church history. That's the way I've divided it up. The first book we are going to read is probably going to be the most challenging book you're going to read all year. I want to say that again. The first book will be the most challenging, I think, because it is a poem. It is a poem called the Aeneid. And I want to spend some time talking about this poem. The reason poetry can be difficult to read is because you know, when you tell a story, you always use complete sentences, and it's just very matter of fact, and you tell the plot. But poetry doesn't do that. And so those of you who read the Iliad and the Odyssey with me last year know what I mean. It's sometimes just snippets of an idea or a simile, a grand, huge simile gets stuck in. So I'm going to give you some tips about reading a poem that I should have given you guys last year, and I think I forgot, but I'm going to correct that mistake this year before you start reading it. But I want to tell you a little bit about this book. First of all, does everybody's book look like mine? And don't panic if it doesn't. It's okay if it doesn't. Oh, it's fine too. Is it not Fitzgerald? Is it Fagles? That's fine. I told everybody that I did not mind if you got a different translation, and as far as I know, I didn't. Let me look at the questions. I guess I can't promise this. I don't think I put behind the questions any line numbers to look at. You know how I did with the Iliad and the Odyssey? Because they might not be right if you have a different edition. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The Fagles is an excellent translation. Don't worry about it, okay? So this is a poem with a very enigmatic name. And I actually need to tell you about the main character of the poem. And I want to read a little section from the poem, the Iliad. First of all, before I do that actually, I am going to briefly tell you the story of the Trojan War. Okay? Very briefly. This is just the super abbreviated version. So some of you know all of what I'm going to say. Some of you may not, but you know, it has been a year since we read the Iliad now. So a refresher might be in order. Some of you, like Alice, 2 years ago, we read the Trojan War book and Simeon, but you might not remember. So I do have Simeon Karsten. I didn't call you wrong. See, I still, after all this time, I have trouble with that. So once upon a time, there was a city. No, let's start before that. Once upon a time, there was a sea nymph named Thetis. And Thetis was lovely, and because she was so lovely, she caught the eye of Zeus, who was always on the lookout for pretty girls. He just couldn't help himself. And he said, oh, I like her. And then he heard a prophecy about her and said, whoa, she's going to have a baby. Whatever baby she has is going to be stronger than his dad. And Zeus said, well, we can't have that. So I'm going to marry her off. I'm going to marry her off to a mortal, to a non-god, just so that whatever kid she has, he can't be stronger than a mortal, right? Even if he's stronger than his dad. So I'm good. So they threw a wedding. They chose Peleus to be the happy groom. It doesn't sound like Thetis was a very happy bride, frankly. Really? I married this guy? Yes. So they had a very nice wedding, and they invited all the gods and goddesses except one, the goddess of arguing, the goddess of discord, because who wants arguing at their wedding? But she came anyway, just like Maleficent in Sleeping Beauty, who doesn't get invited to the christening. It's exactly the same story. And so she comes, and she, being the goddess of arguing, knows how to stir up an argument. She does. It's her job description. So she brings a golden apple, solid gold, and on the apple it says, for the fairest, for the most beautiful. What? It means the same thing. Usually they say to the fairest or for the fairest. And she just rolls it out in the middle of the wedding reception. And of course, all the goddesses, ooh, it's mine, I'm the most beautiful, I'm the most beautiful. So this argument goes on for over a decade. Oh, I know, they will not let it go. And three goddesses in particular are in the running. We have Hera, queen of the gods, Athena, goddess of wisdom, and Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. The smart girls still want to be pretty. So they don't know what to do, so they said, okay, there's this shepherd guy. He lives outside of the city Troy. His name's Paris. He's actually the son of the king and queen of Troy, but for reasons I won't go into, they decided to get rid of him when he was a baby, but shepherds found him and raised him. So they said, let's go as Paris. He's pretty fair-minded guy. He's all right. So they go and they say, Paris, which one of us is the prettiest? And Hera says, hey, Paris, if you pick me, I'm the queen of the gods. I'll make you a ruler. I'll give you power. And he says, And then Athena says, hey, Paris, I'm the goddess of wisdom. If you give me the apple, I'll make you wise. And he says, And Aphrodite says, hey, I'm the goddess of love and beauty. I'll give you the most beautiful woman in the world. And he said, done. Have the apple, right? So, unfortunately, the most beautiful woman in the world is already married.
He could have used
Yeah. Her name is Helen. And she is the wife of a man named Menelaus. He lives in Greece. And Menelaus is the king of Sparta, but his brother is named Agamemnon, and he's the king in Mycenae. He's the king over all the other kings of Greece. Right? So Helen's brother-in-law, pretty powerful guy. Paris gets on a boat and he goes to Sparta and he just takes her. I mean, she comes, in most stories she's okay with it because he's pretty charming. And she just runs off with him to Troy. Well, Menelaus goes to his brother's house. Agamemnon, they took my wife. You took my wife. What a jerk. And Agamemnon says, well, we're going to go get her back. Let's muster every city in Greece. Everybody send ships and soldiers. 1,000 ships. We're going to go whoop up on Troy, get your wife back. 10 years later, they were still waiting to whoop up on Troy. Finally, though, I'm skipping over it much, but finally, they just couldn't do it. Their best warriors were dead. Achilles, their strongest guy, was dead. It wasn't looking good. And finally, Odysseus, the cleverest one of all, said, I've got an idea. I'm working with this guy, Epirus here. We're going to build an enormous horse out of wood. Ginormous horse. And we're going to just put it out on the beach, and we're all going to pretend to sail away, but really we're just going to go behind an island and hide. And we're going to put guys inside the horse, and then we'll trick them into bringing the horse inside the city. And after they do, the guys will just come out of the horse at night and kill everybody and burn the city down. Yeah. And they did, and it worked.
What they did, what the Trojans ended up doing was when they saw that the fleet had won, their gateway wasn't big enough for the horse, so they ended up knocking down a section
Knocked down their walls.
wall just to bring in the horse.
So there will be more details about that in the Aeneid, actually. So I will save more details on that. So the reason I gave you that backstory is, first of all, because it makes what I'm about to read make much more sense. Second of all, you should know that that story about the attack of Troy and the story about the clever man Odysseus getting home were written in two very long poems by a man named Homer. The Iliad, which is all about fighting, and the Odyssey, which is all about a man. Remember, sing to me, muse, the man of twists and turns, right? Virgil is doing something similar. Yes, Kyle?
I mean, the stuff shouldn't work. I just didn't understand, like when we did it last year, and I never had to ask questions. Why did the men that was watching the city, watching people out fighting, why did they notice that they didn't put people in horse?
I don't know. It was, they didn't have floodlights. It's very dark at night when there are no lights. That might explain some of it. Maybe they built it around the corner and pushed it in. I don't know. If it was pushable, do you know what I mean, to get it into the city? So during one of the battles that's told in this epic poem, the Iliad, this is the passage we come to. Aeneas was a Trojan. He was not a son of the king, but he was a cousin, one of Hector's cousins, okay? He was a cousin. Well, because Priam had 50 daughters and 50 sons. Okay. So here's what it says in the Iliad. Aeneas was on the battlefield. He was in great danger. By the way, you should know that Aeneas' mom is Aphrodite. Just, I guess I should throw that in. Don't even try. And here's what it says. Come now. This is the gods talking to themselves. We ourselves may take him out of danger, Aeneas, and make sure that Zeus shall not be angered by his death at Achilles' hands. His fate is to escape, to ensure that the great line of Dardanus, that's the founder of Troy, may not unseated perish from the world. For Zeus cared more for Dardanus of all the sons he had by women, and now Zeus has turned against the family of Priam. Therefore, Aeneas and his sons and theirs will be lords of Trojans born hereafter. Just that one line. The Romans understood themselves to be the descendants of Aeneas. That Aeneas escaped from Troy with a band of followers, and he traveled away to Italy. And this took several hundred years of generations. Eventually his descendants are going to be Romulus and Remus, who are going to found Rome. The Romans said, we are Trojans. We are escapee Trojans. We are related to the royal family, and we are descendants of Aeneas. Yes, sir?
Perhaps a poetic way, Rome ended up conquering Greece.
It did.
So
It did.
The Greeks won the first round of the
And the Romans ran the second round, indeed. So does that story make sense to everybody? So this is a poem about a man who is escaping from Troy. Now, the reason I went into this history is because this is telling a story that happens way before Rome is founded. But this is a story written during the time of Augustus. It was written smack dab in the middle of Roman history. So here's what happened. When Augustus got power, he avenged his grand uncle Julius Caesar's death, and he had everything calmed down. He called to him some friends, artists, writers, and he said, we need a national story, if you will. The Greeks have the Iliad, and the Greeks have the Odyssey, but the Romans don't have something like that. Virgil, will you write something like that? Publius Virgilius Maro is his full name, but we call him Virgil. And he was already a well-known author. He had written a series of poems called the Eclogues, which are all about life in the country. Like, ooh, we're all shepherds, and it was a popular thing at the time. We're just shepherds hanging out in the country, and life is just delicious. And then a series called the Georgics, which are advice on farming. I kid you not, there's a whole chapter on beekeeping. I think it's a little boring. I don't like it. But it's considered a masterpiece of Latin poetry. So Virgil was already well known for this. And so he called Virgil up and he said, can you write this? And he said, yes, Mr. Augustus, I will write this for Rome. And he began working on this poem, and he worked on it for 10 years. He did other things too, for sure. He was traveling, and he was headed back. He had been in Greece, and he was traveling back to Italy. He was born in the north of Italy. He wasn't from Rome, but he'd grown up and gone to school in Rome. He was headed back to his old ancestral farmlands, and he died on the way. And before he died, he turned to his friends with him and he said, burn it. Burn it, and I am dead. Burn it. Did they burn it? They did not burn it, because we have it here. Now, we don't know why. But some people think, well, it's just because he never had a chance to do the final edits. And in fact, you may notice when you read that in one place, he has a character say something, and then another place he has a different character having said it. He contradicted himself. But it's okay. I may or may not bring it up. It's not really that important. But there may be another reason, and I'm not going to tell you that reason now. We'll explore that as we read it, okay? But for whatever reason, he wanted it destroyed on his deathbed. But he died, and Augustus showed up almost immediately after, and he said, "Oh, no you don't. We'll not be burning that. Hand it over." And they started making copies, as they did, because they had to do them all by hand, and distributing this poem. And Rome had a national myth, if you will, a national story. I mean, people knew the story. It wasn't brand new to them, but it was put in a new way, in an inspiring way, to make them just proud to be Roman. That's what Augustus wanted. Let's just be proud to be Roman. Patriotism, right? You know, if you think about it, America, we have some national stories too, like Paul Bunyan and Johnny Appleseed, who, as far as I know, is a real person. I'm pretty sure Paul Bunyan is not a real person, or not, not huge with a blue ox. John Henry, also a real person. And it doesn't have to be made up people, you know, like George Washington and the cherry tree. You all know that? Do you know the story I mean when I say that? And these stories that make us who we are, right? That tell us our leaders are virtuous, our leaders are honest, we are hardworking, we are independent. We can beat that steam drill, right? Like John Henry, because we're tough as Americans. Well, Rome wanted the same thing. And so Virgil gave it to them. Virgil also is important because he wrote a very intriguing poem in the Eclogues, in his farm poetry book. It's the 4th Eclogue, and the early church considered it a prophecy of Jesus, and they picked up on it. And it's in your book, and I'm going to read it to you. All right? It is on page 2, yes. All right. Now, some of this, you're not going to know what the heck he's talking about. Totally fine. But the parts that I think are important, I'm going to read more loudly and with emphasis, and probably end up doing something with my hand like this, which I tend to do. You know, I'm a hand motion sort of person. To point out the parts that I think that I want to highlight, okay? But let's just read the whole thing because we can, all right? Muses of Sicily, essay we now a somewhat loftier task. Not all men love coppice or lowly tamarisk. Sing we woods, woods worthy of a consul, let them be. Now the last age, by Cumae's Sibyl sung, has come and gone, and the majestic roll of circling centuries begins anew. Justice returns. Returns old Saturn's reign. That's the golden age, when everything was perfect. With a new breed of men sent down from heaven. Only do thou, at the boy's birth, in whom the iron shall cease, the golden race arise. Befriend him, chaste Lucina, 'tis thine own Apollo reigns. And in thy consulate, this glorious age, O Pollio, shall begin, and the months enter on their mighty march. Under thy guidance, whatso tracks remain of our old wickedness, once done away, shall free the earth from never-ceasing fear. He shall receive the life of gods, and see heroes with gods commingling, and himself be seen of them, and with his Father's worth reign o'er a world at peace. For thee, O boy, first shall the earth until pour freely forth her childish gifts, the gadding ivy spray with foxglove and Egyptian bean flour mixed, and laughing eye to campus. Of themselves, untended, will the she-goats then bring home their udders swollen with milk, while flocks afield shall of the monstrous lion have no fear. Thy very cradle shall pour forth for thee caressing flowers. The serpent too shall die. Die the treacherous poison plant, and far and wide Assyrian spices spring. But soon as thou hast skill to read of heroes' fame, and of thy father's deeds, and inly learn what virtue is, the plain by slow degrees with waving corn crop shall to golden grow. From the wild briar shall hang the blushing grape, and stubborn oaks sweat honeydew. Nathless yet shall there lurk within of ancient wrong some traces, bidding tempt the deep with ships, gird towns with walls, with furrows cleave the earth. Therewith a second Typhus shall there be, her hero friend a second Argo bear. New wars too shall arise, and once again some great Achilles to some Troy be sent. Then when the mellowing years have made thee man, no more shall mariner sail, nor pine tree bark ply traffic on the seas, but every land shall all things bear alike. The glebe no more shall feel the hero's grip, nor vine the hook. The sturdy plowman shall loose yoke from steer. No wool, I love this part, nor wool with varying colors learn to lie, but in the meadows shall the ram himself, now with soft flush of purple, now with tint of yellow saffron, teach his fleece to shine. The sheep are going to turn themselves colors. Like you don't even have to dye the wool anymore. It's awesome. While clothed in natural scarlet graze the lambs. Such still, such ages weave ye as you run, sang to their spindles the consenting fates, by destiny's unalterable decree. Assume thy greatness, for the time draws nigh, dear child of gods, great progeny of Jove. See how it totters. The world's orbed might, earth and wide ocean and the vault profound, all see, enraptured of the coming time. Ah, might such length of days to me be given, and breath suffice me to rehearse thy deeds, nor Thracian Orpheus should outsing me then, nor Linus, though his mother this and that his sire should aid, Orpheus Calliope and Linus fair Apollo. Nay, though Pan, with Arcady for judge, may claim contest, with Arcady for judge great Pan himself should own him foiled, and from the field retire. That whole section, he says, when this thing happens, whatever's going to happen, I could sing about it so wonderful. Orpheus wouldn't be better than me. I'd win every song contest to sing about this. Begin to greet thy mother with a smile, O baby boy. 10 months of weariness for thee she bore. O baby boy, begin. For him on whom his parents have not smiled, God's deemed not worthy of their board or bed. Now, was I emphatic enough for you to catch something?
Yeah. One question.
Yeah.
What the heck does this have to do with farming?
Oh, it doesn't, which is also why it's weird. Because he says at the beginning, well, I can sing of forests, I can sing of woods, but not everybody digs that, so I'm going to sing about something else. Okay. Did you catch? A baby boy is going to come into the world, and he is going to be a ruler of peace. And the animals are going to be at peace, and they're going to lie down with each other. And he's going to bring the golden age back, and the traces of our wickedness are going to be done away. Are you kidding me? And he wrote this about 30 years before Jesus was born. And here's the thing, no one knows who he was talking about. People speculate about certain young men born about that time that he saw promise in, maybe, who had illustrious parents, and maybe he thought, good things, he expected good things of them, but nobody knows for sure. So the early church read that, and they said, holy cow. I don't know that they actually said the words holy cow, but probably not. They said, Virgil was given prophecy, he just didn't know it. He didn't know what he was saying. Much like the high priest, when he says, it is good that one man die, than that the whole people perish, so that they would kill Jesus. He didn't realize what he was saying, did he? One man was going to die for all the people, just not in the way the high priest thought. He spoke prophecy, he just didn't know. And the early church said, I think Virgil was doing the same thing. So Virgil turned into this sort of Christian sort of guy. And 1,300 years later, an Italian poet named Dante, whose work we'll read next year, the Divine Comedy, takes a traveler through hell and purgatory and paradise, and his guide is Virgil. His guide is Virgil. And that's the reason, because they thought Virgil was onto something. There were a group of people, Socrates was one of them, that the early Christians thought of as sort of would have been Christians if they'd had a chance. If they had heard the gospel, they would have believed it. It's like the virtuous pagans. And I'm not making a comment about people's admission into heaven or non-admission of heaven. I'm not making a theological comment here, all right? But that's just, they saw these guys were so close. They were so virtuous. And Virgil was one of them. And it's the fourth eclogue that puts him in that category. Because they thought he was a prophet. It's a cool story. It's you know, like truth is stranger than fiction. Like how did he write this and we don't even know who he's talking about? And he talks about animals lying down at peace with each other. It's almost like he's talking about the first coming and the second coming all in one poem. On page 1, I have some more notes about Virgil. And right in the middle, I have his epitaph. He wrote his own epitaph. That's kind of cool. I gave it to you in Latin, but in English it says, Mantua gave me life. That was his hometown. Calabria took it away. That's where he died. Naples holds me now. Actually, he couldn't read this. He couldn't have written this. I thought he wrote this himself. And now I'm reading this and I'm thinking, I must have misinformed you, or I must be misinformed. Someone must have written it. Because I think Naples is where he's buried. And obviously, unless he's more supernatural than we think, he didn't write that. I sang of pastures, farms, and commanders. And this is his book about commanders. Does anybody remember who read the Iliad with me last year? What is the first word of the Iliad? Rage. Rage. Oh, muses, sing, goddess of the rage of Peleus' son Achilles, right? This is a poem about somebody getting angry. Somebody getting so angry that he says, I am so angry that I hope my friends die. I hope my friends all die so that they can appreciate me and want me back. Right? Is that a pretty good summary, right? That's rage. Does anybody remember what the Odyssey begins with? Sing, O muse, of what? The man of twists and turns. So, Virgil, I'm afraid to even erase this because it's going to be nasty. Virgil starts with these words in Latin. Arma virumque cano. I sing of weapons and a man. I sing of arms and a man. He's doing both. He just told us. This is the Iliad and the Odyssey in one book. It's only half as long. Aren't we lucky? It's only half as long as one of them. He is going to tell us about warfare. That's an Iliad part. And he's going to tell us about a man. And that's the Aeneas part. That's the Odyssey part. If you have not read the Iliad and the Odyssey, it's absolutely fine. You can follow the Aeneid, fine. But if you have last year, you're going to notice a lot of stuff that he's doing. Are you guys familiar? What? Yes, write a Roman Iliad. Yeah, then you have to do it. Are you guys familiar with fan fiction? Do you know what I mean by fan fiction? There's even websites where people, some of it's quite elaborate and very well done. People write stories based on previously published material, or movies or things like that. There are people that like to joke and say, Virgil wrote Homer fan fiction. This whole thing is just Homer fan fiction. Kinda. So I'll bring up some of those as we go through. But a couple of helps also on page 1. Let me see what time it is. Oh, okay, you're all right. People's names. Now, I don't know about the Fagles one, but if it looks like it's just like the Iliad and the Odyssey one, which is fine. These have glossaries in the back, okay? They have a list of names and places and what they are. Everybody look at me. Don't look up every name in the back. You will just crawl into a hole of despair and just not come out of it. You don't have to look them all up. That's not why it's here. But if you're reading and somebody seems important and you can't quite remember who they are, that's what this is for, okay? If it just seems pivotal to what's going on, you're just like, I can't remember which side he's on, because there are going to be sides, or there wouldn't be much arma, would there? Use the back. But so here's some names to keep in mind. Whenever you see the word Teucrians, and by the way, this is also from the Fitzgerald translation. So the Fagles might not use Teucrians, you might just say Trojans, which makes it easy for you, okay? Teucrians are Trojans. The Teucrians are Aeneas and his crew, who, remember, have left a burning city. Those guys jumping out of that horse, and they are hightailing it to somewhere else. Anywhere where there's not flames and swords would be good. You know what, it's going to take them a while. So whenever Mr. Fitzgerald says Teucrians, he means Aeneas, the Trojans that are escaped. Just to note that the Romans call Greek gods and people sometimes different names. Ulysses and Odysseus are the same person. Ulysses is the Roman name. Just note, Pyrrhus, also known as Neoptolemus, is Achilles' son, who doesn't show up until after Achilles is dead. He doesn't show up to the Trojan War until Achilles' death. Jupiter is Zeus, I should have put on there too. Jupiter and Jove are the same god, and the Greeks call him Zeus. Hera, the one the Greeks call Hera, is Juno, okay? The blacksmith god, the Greeks call Hephaestus, is Vulcan. The Greek Ares is Mars to the Romans. The Greek Artemis is Diana. The Greek Aphrodite is Venus, sometimes Cytherea. Wouldn't you like to just have like 5 names and you just answer to any of them all equally? And people just choose what? We do. Yes, there are many names of God in the Old Testament. This is true. Yes, but he has a lot of names. But the point is he has a lot of names. And the Greek Athena is Minerva, also known as Pallas. Pallas Athena, sometimes we would call her in Greek. Watch out for returning Homeric characters. So this week, in your reading, you are going to meet some people that you met in the Iliad. If you didn't meet them in the Iliad with me last year, no worries. They're still interesting. And just to note something, the last thing I wrote on here. This is especially directed to you guys that did Greece with me last year. So when Aeneas tells the story of running away from Troy, it says he grabs up his household gods. He brings the gods with him. And you go, what's up with the gods, the household gods? And we never talked about that last year. That's because Greeks didn't do that. That's a Roman thing. Virgil is putting a Roman thing in Troy. But the Romans would have little shrines in their homes with idols, with statues, which were the gods of their household, of their family. They called them the lares. Lar is the singular. So lares and penates, plural. And they were just the gods they traveled with. You know what? The Mesopotamian people, pagan people, did that too. Do you remember when Jacob ran off and then Laban got his Laban, Uncle Laban got ticked off with him, and he was going to hit the road with Rachel and Leah and lots of kids, and he grabbed his stuff. He said, your father's not treating me as he had. It said Rachel stole the household gods and put them in the saddlebags under the saddle and sat on them.
Why would she do that?
Because apparently Rachel was not fully on board with Jacob's one God thing. even at that point, or she would not have stolen the household gods. Either that or she did it just to tick her dad off, which I really don't like that version. Do you know what I mean? That seems... it could be. I mean, the Bible doesn't tell us why. But she took them, which kind of means that she, you know, if you grow up pagan, it's hard to just flip a switch, you know what I mean, and think these idols aren't anything anymore. Or perhaps they're even worse than nothing. They're evil. And so she took them. And whether she thought they would protect her and Jacob and Leah, or whether she just wanted to hurt her dad, which seems like a mean version of the story, I don't know. But the Greeks didn't really do that. They didn't have an ancestor household god sort of thing. But the Romans did, and some other people did. So Aeneas is going to run off with the household gods. It's a very Roman thing for him to do, not a very Trojan thing for him to do. Okay, just a second. I need to check our time. Okay, so we're about 11:40, not 12:45. She's like, Mrs. Ferguson, no. 11:45 or 11:50 is what we're shooting. 50? We're okay with 50? Okay, so we will always shoot for 11:45, but you all who were in here last year know very well I'm going to be keeping you many times till 11:50 because I get carried away. I want to make this, I told you that this is probably the most challenging thing we're going to read, and I want to make it as easy to follow as possible. So I have a couple of tips for you. First of all, let me talk about the plot. I'm not going to tell you the whole plot because then it is a spoiler, right? But if you remember, the Iliad, the poem about the Trojan War, just starts in the 9th year of the war. Homer doesn't tell you anything about what happened before. He doesn't tell you why they're there fighting. He doesn't mention Helen. He just from other poems and other writers. And so they call it the Trojan War cycle, the whole collection of all the things written about the Trojan War in various places. But he starts just smack dab in what literarily they refer to as in medias res. In the middle of things. In the middle things, basically, in the middle of things. That's all that means. So a story that begins in medias res just means they just plop you, boom, into the action and they don't explain it. But as you know, also from the Odyssey, which begins in medias res, he's just pining away on an island, and how did you get there? What happened? Well, when he goes to Phaeacia, and they say, oh, you're the famous Odysseus. Tell us about your travels. And then he tells a story. Aeneas is going to do something similar, all right? But when we meet Aeneas, they've been traveling for quite a while, and they have not found a home. For a while, they didn't even know where the home was, which would be, I was going to say irritating. It's more than irritating. How long do you want to sail around on a boat and try to build cities, and then the gods say, no, go somewhere else? Couldn't you have told me that before I built this? No, to go somewhere else. That's what Aeneas has been doing. And he's going to end up on the coast of North Africa. And I feel like you will appreciate this section much more. I mean, you can understand it without knowing this, but I think you'll appreciate it more if you find this out. The city where he washes up, the city that's being built is called Carthage. And I'm not going to tell you who's building it, or his relationship with the queen who is building it in the Aeneid. Carthage is the arch enemy of Rome. Carthage is the arch enemy of Rome. Between, in the 200s and 100s BC, okay, they had a series of 3 brutal wars in which Carthage was eventually squished like a bug. Carthage was obliterated.
Not before dealing with Rome.
Not before dealing Rome, terrible damage. You may be familiar with a general named Hannibal. He was from Carthage. So just keep that in mind, because I tell you this because every Roman reading this book, when Aeneas shows up at Carthage, like, don't go there. Carthage bad, very bad. Evil people. Okay.
It's like those kids in a movie theater screaming advice at the main character.
Yes. Like, no, Aeneas, don't stay. Okay, that's how the Romans would have felt about it when he showed up at Carthage. That will help you. Another tip I have about reading a poem is, did you notice the eclogue I read to you? It's a poem too. And did you notice I didn't stop at the end of every line? I stopped where there was punctuation marks. Let me just read the first, no, I'm not going to read this whole thing again, so just relax, all right? But let me just read the first few lines. Watch where I stop. Muses of Sicily, essay we now a somewhat loftier task. Not all men love coppice or lowly tamarisk. Sing we woods worthy of a consul, let them be. Okay, do you see how I didn't stop after the word now? I didn't do this. Muses of Sicily, essay we now. A somewhat loftier task, not all men love. Coppice or lowly tamarisk, sing we woods. That's not going to make any sense. If you follow through to the end mark, it makes sense, all right? So train yourself to do it that way. The end marks, the commas, the punctuation is your friend. Does that make sense? Because we often tend to just want to read a line at a time when it's laid out like this. Don't do that, because then it will be all choppy and it won't make sense. But read from punctuation to punctuation, and that whole thing is a thought, okay? Does that make sense? What else do I need to tell you? Let me make sure I know which 3 chapters. Oh, you're reading the first 3 chapters. They're called books, by the way. My Iliad and Odyssey readers are familiar with this already, and Herodotus and Thucydides. They're called books and not chapters. Originally, when there were copies of the Aeneid, you know, they weren't in books like this. They were on scrolls, and it took 12 scrolls. Each scroll was a book. It was a biblion. So there would be the 12 scrolls that were the Aeneid, and so when they put them in books like this, they ended up being chapters, but they still call them books based on the scrolls they're on. So I'll give you a preview, and then I want to talk about what you're going to write for me this week. Book 1, in medias res, right? I've left Troy, I'm looking for a home, I got these people with me, things are not going well. Book 2, oh, Aeneas, tell me about your travels. This should seem very familiar. This is the backstory. And book 3, it's called, what's it called in yours? Mine's called Sea Wanderings and Strange Meetings. Many ports of call, okay. So obviously, it involves sailing around. He's continuing to tell his backstory, all right? So this week, you're going to hear how Troy falls. You're going to hear the story of the Trojan horse. And we're going to wonder, has Aeneas found a home in Carthage? We hope not. One more point, okay, and while it's in my head, and then Kyle first. Juno is going to be very angry at Aeneas at the beginning of the book. Aeneas is a Trojan. Why does Juno hate him? Because she didn't get the apple. She's anti-Troy. She's anti-Troy. This explains why she is so angry. All right, Kyle, let her rip. You waited very patiently. What? The Aeneid is the only book. All you're reading this week is books 1 through 3 of the Aeneid. Okay. That is all. That's half the amount that I was giving you for the Iliad and the Odyssey, yes. Oh, yeah, I redid them completely, yes. I will try to remember that. Your parents all have my email, and I every week send out an email to your parents telling them what we did in class and what we talked about, what the assignments are. If you would like to also get those emails, get my email from your parents, and then send me an email from your personal email and say, please add me to the list, and I will do so. All right, but I'll try to remember. It might not hurt you just to email me anyway. Yes.
Are we going to see the fall of Troy in the
Yes.
That's cool.
Yes, it is.
Also, with Garrett hating all Trojans, do you consider racist?
I don't care. Completely irrelevant to me, yes. I will tell you that in a minute, yes. Oh, everybody wants to write. Okay, so let's talk about our writing. Okay, I feel I am braced against the groans that are going to just emanate from the room and push me against the whiteboard. No, it's not that bad. So I read too much and I don't do other things. And I'm not ashamed, but I do read too much. So I just like to read everything about everything, and when I get ready for classes, I usually spend a year. You know, I've been spending about 9 months reading Roman history, and I've read some things I've never read before, which is awesome. But I was digging around in the library, and I found a book called C.S. Lewis's Lost Aeneid, and I thought, well, I have to read that, because who doesn't want to read that? And I'm teaching the Aeneid. Turns out that C.S. Lewis, is there anybody in here who doesn't know who C.S. Lewis is? Or hasn't, which is not, don't be ashamed. I thought we were all familiar. You know, he was a professor of medieval and Renaissance literature. That was his day job. He's a college professor. He wrote Christian apologetics, and he wrote novels, and he wrote wonderful essays. He wrote poetry. What? He wrote, and what is known as the Space Trilogy, which I'm still trying to figure out how in the world to get a class of students to read that with me, because I just don't have room for it in my modern year, and it just breaks my heart. Anyway, so as a hobby, as a sideline, he decided to rewrite the Aeneid, translate it from, I mean, not rewrite it, to translate it, but translate it into a poetic form called Alexandrines. Not any, as in no one's, not related to Alexander in any way, as far as I know. Although if you want to claim that this is in your honor, if your name is Alex in this class, you go for that. Alexandrines are lines. Please do not panic when I write this down if you don't know what it means, because I can explain it. Iambic hexameter. Lines of iambic hexameter. They do not have to rhyme. They do not necessarily rhyme at the end. Okay, so what does this mean? How many sides in a hexagon?
6.
Okay, so hexameter means 6 times. Whatever this is, you do it 6 times. That easy enough? All right? Iambic is da-da. Okay, and this is where I know, and see, there's the groan that's pushing me against. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. If you can answer this question, you can do this. All right? I'm going to write 3 names on the board. 2 of them are going to have the same stressed syllable, the same syllable that you hit, and the other one's going to be different, okay? I'm going to think of the names. Which one is different? Oh, I'm going to trip over my cord because I forgot about it. Why? Oh, okay, okay. That is not the right reason. Yeah. Does anybody, okay, so Ethan is correct that my name, Michelle, is something different from Karsten and Alex. Does anyone else think? I think you know. Do you want to give it? No. You look like you wanted to say something. Do you think you know? No, I'm not outing you or anything. You looked like you were onto it.
It's Bobo
We're getting closer. I'm stressing the first syllable. Okay, so listen. Karsten. I'm overdoing it, okay? Alex. I don't say Karsten. That's weird. Alex. But I say Michelle. I don't say Michelle. Do you hear? Do you hear? Two of them have Karsten, Alex, but Michelle. Can you hear that? Most words have one syllable that we say harder than the other syllables. Sometimes there's more than one, but okay. Which syllable? First or second? Do we say harder? Second. Parade. I don't say parade. Nobody says parade, right? Oh, I was looking at you. Okay, this one has 4 syllables. Which one's stressed? Which is the second. Elizabeth. I don't say Elizabeth. 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 Does everybody hear that? For some people, they hear it right away. Some people don't hear it right away, okay? But every single word that has more than one syllable, there might be some that we stress almost evenly, but most English words have one syllable that we say harder. Syllable. The first one, right? Pandemonium. Pandemonium. It's the third. Do you see? I don't say pandemonium. I can't even. It's hard to do it wrong. It just naturally comes out of my mouth. Pandemonium. Pandemonium. And you hear pandemonium. It has its own rhythm. Serendipity has the same as pandemonium. They have a sound. And you know what? We don't spend a lot of time listening to poetry or reading it out loud, and we're becoming deaf to it, like going nose blind to the bad smells in your house. You know, we're deaf to the sound of the music of the words that we speak. But when we hear a rhythm, we know it. And some, for example, Dr. Seuss, some poets have a very pronounced rhythm, right? In fact, when you hear that rhythm, it reminds you of Dr. Seuss. So the beginning of The Cat in the Hat, and no, I don't sit around just memorizing, although I do know a very long Dr. Seuss poem that I learned when I was 9 years old, and I can still do it. If you ever wanted to grab me in the hall, I'll be glad to do it for you. But I read this so many times to my kids, The Cat in the Hat. The sun did not shine, it was too wet to play, so we sat in the house all that cold, cold, wet day. I sat there with Sally, we sat there, we two, and I said how I wish we had something to do. Too wet to go out and too cold to play ball, so we sat in the house, we did nothing at all. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And whenever we hear that, we think Dr. Seuss, because he always writes in that meter, right? If you're familiar with The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, it also has a really strong. Once upon a midnight dreary ball, I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. It's got a very strong rhythm. So iambic is, put a bunch of stuff in the way here. Iambic is da-da. Michelle is iambic. Parade is iambic. And the way we indicate it with poetry marks, this means a short syllable and this means a long. Da-da. And if it's hexameter, you do it 6 times. Da-da, 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 da-da. Every single line sounds like da-da, 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 da-da. It turns out that iambic is really easy in English. It's the easiest one to do, which is why sonnets, so many great poetry was written in iambic pentameter, or sometimes, right, because it just flows out of you. Honestly, I did this, it was the modern year. Carson, do you remember? I tried to, I went to buy a jug of milk at Hy-Vee yesterday. I just did it. I went to buy a jug of milk at Hy-Vee yesterday. Boom. That's how hard it is. It's not really very hard, but you just have to hear it. And some of you are going to go home and you're going to say, I can't hear it. It's too hard, I can't hear it. Or I'm just going to write down words because I don't know. But if you practice, you can hear it. If you speak English, you can hear it. Because we use it all the time. We use it all the time. We did it again. No, that one isn't perfect iambic, okay? So I'm going to ask you, is this your question?
No.
So what do you want us to do?
No. Basically, maybe more than
No, because, yeah, I mean, often you're probably not going to use more than words of 3 syllables. There are words like macaroni, the mac and the roan, we kind of equally stress. Macaroni. But yes, I understand what you mean. But remember, you don't have to use only words of 2 syllables. It's not a string of 6 words of 2 syllables. So to prove this to you, I wrote one. And by the way, here's what you're going to do for me. You are going to promise me to give it your best try, okay? I would like you to choose a story, a very short story. Do not choose all 9 movies of Star Wars. Don't do it. Don't do the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Just don't go there. I chose an Aesop's Fable because they're short, all right? And I would like you to try to do what C.S. Lewis was doing with the Aeneid, only with a very short story. Can you tell it in Alexandrine, in iambic hexameter? Now, this is a challenge. If you come to me next week and you get 1 line, 2 lines, but you did it, I'm happy, all right? But I'm happier if you can actually tell a whole short story. It's going to take some finagling because you're going to want to say something and the word that you want to use won't fit. So maybe you're going to have to go to a thesaurus and find a word that means what you want to say, but it's got different meter. Yes? Just relative to the story, and yes, I'll answer Alex's question and then I'll make this more clear. Yes?
Is iambic hexameter Alexandrines, like, can they be used?
Yes. And Alexandrine lines just simply means lines of iambic hexameter. Okay, so on page 4, I wrote one. I did it. Page 4. I did the tortoise and the hare. Some of you have been tortoised and hared before by me. Apparently, I really like that story, and I do everything I do with the tortoise and the hare because it's convenient. Okay, I am going to read this very poorly. I'm not going to read it in good style. You know, when you read poetry, you generally don't do what I did when I recited The Cat in the Hat and the Raven, all right? You don't want to just sound like a marching band, you know, when you're reading poetry. But I'm going to sound like a marching band so you can hear it. And here's what I want you to look for. Sometimes I'm going to stop at the end of each I am. Okay? So you can hear it. But sometimes I'm going to end up stopping in the middle of a word because my word runs into the next I am. Is what I'm trying to do. A tortoise and a hare once planned a match to race and find out who was faster, who takes second place. The starting gun exploded with a mighty roar, and both contestants ran as they had ne'er before. But soon the hare exhausted exhausted with his frantic push, encountering clumps of moss behind a flowering bush, lay down and soon must snore, ring dead to all the world, but suddenly loud shout, in his long ears unfurled, and heard his doom, for victor's palms will always be won by steady progress and tenacity. This is very low-class poetry, but it's doable, okay? Now, I want you to notice a couple of things. First of all, I did something that one of my children hates. He hates it when they do this in hymns. He doesn't like ne'er and encountering. He doesn't like it when I get rid of a syllable and just put a apostrophe there in ne'er and encountering, because I made encountering 3 syllables, but the word is actually encountering. It's 4 syllables, and poets do this all the time, so fire away. Second of all, look at my last line. Won by steady progress and tenacity. It only has 11 syllables. I fudged it. All right? I started here. Won by steady progress and tenacity. I skipped the first. And that's okay. When you read poetry that's written in meter, it's rarely perfect meter. In fact, when it is, it starts to sound like Dr. Seuss. All right, you start to sound sing-songy. Poets mix it up all the time. If you need to just leave out a syllable, or if you end up having where you have to do for a couple to make it work, it's okay. It's the predominant meter, okay? If the majority of it is iambic hexameter, then it's iambic hexameter. Does that make sense? Give it a shot, but it will take, this is not something you want to sit down and do next Tuesday. You know what I mean? Just not even think about it all week. And it might not be something you want to sit down and do in one sitting. And it's going to mean you just have to think about the sound of words. Do it out loud. Go, if it's embarrassing, go in a room where there is no one else and say the words out loud to yourself. Hear what the pattern is. All right? And they all have a pattern. And as you think about, okay, this is what I want to say. I did not just sit down and write this. I mean, I didn't work on it really long, I'll be honest. Because I've been reading poetry and trying my hand at writing in meter for some years now. But I had a lot of dead ends. I started to say something and I realized I can't think of the words that will fit the meter to say this thing I want to say. So now I know the general idea, right? Tortoise hare racing, hare sleeps, tortoise wins. This is all I got. Somehow I got to make that happen, but I don't even remember what my sidelines, but I had dead ends. I went and I thought, oh, crud, I can't think of any way to say that. I can't think of any word to substitute to make that happen. So now I've got to go somewhere else. And notice how many times when I read it, I stopped in the middle of a word. It's fine. Your words can run over into the next into the next, we call it foot. Each of these is a foot. There's 6 of them. It's okay to roll your words over. But I think that if you really sit down and give it a try and pick a short, easy story, you will surprise yourself. Not do it. Not do it, okay? So this week, I would like you to try that to the best of your ability. Now, some people, like I said, some people have a harder time with this than others. Some people sing better than others. You know, some people hear tunes better. My oldest daughter just can't sing. She does not hear the tune. She can't sing, bless her heart. And then her sister has a magnificent voice. And it's neither of their faults, right? It's just the way they came. Some people hear the rhythm of words, and some people just don't seem to hear the rhythm of the words very well. But give it a try. Because you know what? Words communicate meaning to us, and that's what we use them for mostly. But words are also beautiful, and we're kind of forgetting that. The modern world has forgotten that words can be beautiful, and we can use them in beautiful ways. And you know, maybe you're not going to become a poet. Maybe this is not something you aspire to. But you know, you can incorporate beauty in words, and even meter sometimes, when you're just writing a story or a paper. It makes it pleasing to your reader. They might not know why it's pleasing, but it makes them pleasing. So give it your best shot. Read books 1 through 3. And how did I manage to be early with you guys? That is crazy. I am notorious for being always over. What? I'm not turning over a new leaf. I just, maybe you guys were just so receptive and good that I, so I got to go. I don't think I'm supposed to let you go for another 5 minutes. So I'm going to shut the recording off.